What makes a whiskey worth its price? Is it age, the name on the bottle, the rarity, or simply the pleasure you get from the first sip? In 2026, whiskey has become more complicated than ever. Some bottles cost hundreds of dollars, others cost less than a dinner, and somewhere between them is the bottle that gives you the most whiskey for your money. So today, Professor Malt has one simple question. What is the best whiskey for the money in 2026? Let's begin with something uncomfortable. A high price doesn't automatically make a whiskey better. Sometimes you're paying for age. Sometimes you're paying for the cask. Sometimes you're paying for a famous name. And sometimes you're paying for the bottle itself. But when we're searching for value, we have to forget the label for a moment. We have to ask a different question. If nobody knew the name, would this whiskey still be worth the money? Value isn't simply about finding the cheapest bottle. A $10 whiskey that you don't enjoy isn't a bargain, and a $100 whiskey that you return to every weekend might be. So Professor Malt has created a simple equation: quality, character, complexity, enjoyment, and price. 5 things, 1 bottle, and no excuses. Our first candidate arrives without a famous name. No luxury packaging, no dramatic story, just whiskey. In the glass, the color is warm gold. The first aromas are soft: vanilla, dried fruit, a little oak, and something slightly floral hiding underneath. The first sip is where things become interesting. It's not trying to impress you. It's simply balanced, sweet enough to invite another sip, but structured enough to keep you thinking. In 2026, Scotch whiskey has a problem. The bottles are getting more expensive, the labels are getting more impressive, and sometimes it's becoming difficult to know what you're actually paying for. So today, Professor Malt is ignoring the labels, ignoring the reputation, and ignoring the price tags. 8 bottles have entered the laboratory. Only 1 will be crowned the best whiskey for the money in 2026. First into the laboratory is one of the most recognizable names in Scotch: Glenfiddich 12-year-old. Pear, vanilla, malt, light oak. It isn't trying to be mysterious, and that's part of its strength. Glenfiddich 12 is the whiskey that reminds us that value doesn't have to be complicated. But can a famous bottle still beat the newer generation of value contenders? Next comes Arran 10-year-old. This is a very different personality. Fresh fruit, citrus, malt, a little spice. There's energy here. It feels young in the best possible way. And suddenly, Professor Malt has a problem. This is very good for the money. Now we move into richer territory. Aberlour 12 double cask. Dried fruit, toffee, cinnamon, ginger. The bourbon and sherry casks are working together rather than competing. This is the kind of whiskey that makes you forget the price for a moment. And that's exactly what we're looking for. Then comes the bottle that has been causing trouble for the competition. Glen Allachie 12, 46%. Rich, nutty, chocolate, dried fruit, polished oak. It doesn't taste like a bottle trying to stay in its price category. It tastes like a whiskey trying to escape it. And Professor Malt is taking notes. Now for the quiet contender. Deanston 12-year-old. Honey, citrus, malt, a slightly waxy texture. Nothing is screaming for attention, but every part of the whiskey seems to know exactly where it belongs. Sometimes the most interesting whiskey in the room is the one nobody expected to win. Then we travel to Islay, but this isn't the Islay many people expect. Bunnahabhain 12, no heavy wall of smoke. Instead, dried fruit, nuts, salt, oak, a gentle coastal character. And suddenly, the island of Isla feels much bigger than we thought. Now Professor Malt lights the fire. Benramach, 10-year-old. Malt, fruit, oak, and just enough smoke to remind you that this is Scotch. It has character without becoming a peat monster. And for someone looking for their first smoky whiskey, this might be one of the smartest places to start. And finally, McNair's Lum Reek, 12-year-old. A blended malt, 46%, matured in bourbon and Pedro Ximénez sherry casks. Smoke, toffee, espresso, sweetness, bitterness. This isn't trying to be polite. It's trying to be interesting. And it succeeds. And third, Deanston 12, a brilliant everyday whiskey. Honest, characterful, easy to recommend. Second, Glenallachie 12, bigger, richer, more intense, one of the most compelling bottles in this price range. And our winner is Erin, 10-year-old, not because it's the oldest, not because it's the rarest, and certainly not because it's the most expensive. It wins because every time we returned to the glass, we wanted another sip. Fresh, fruity, malty, balanced, characterful, and priced like something you can actually enjoy rather than something you have to save for. That's what value means to Professor Malt. The best whiskey for your money isn't the bottle that costs the least. It's the bottle that makes you forget what it cost. This is Professor Malt. Class dismissed.